Hi everyone, how's everyone doing here today? Today I wanted to talk about 46 and 45 and progress, which those numbers obviously represent the current and former president, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Given the recent midterms and some videos I posted, I've gotten some comments and criticism from friends and other people. Lo and behold, there was no red wave, and things went somewhat well for the Democrats and not so good for the Republicans, although things could have been much better for the Democrats, but I'll take whatever victories we can get. And for the record, I want to say one friend seemed to have taken offense when, in a previous video, when I referred to Donald Trump as the Orange Jesus. And of course I was being sarcastic, and I was under the impression that supposedly that's what some of his followers refer to him as, especially the religious ones. But it turns out that was from Liz Cheney, who she heard from another lawmaker whom she did not name. So, I'll admit, I've spoken out against the name calling in the past. It's not something I approve of, even though I've done it, so I'm being kind of a hypocrite on that note. However, moving forward, I'll refrain from doing so. And I think it was the Jesus aspect of it that offended him, because he is Catholic, and you know, using the name of Christ in such a negative light kind of bothered him. So, you know, for anyone that I did offend when saying that, sorry, from a religious point of view. Not so much from a Trump point of view, because he said a lot of ugly things too. Not that two wrongs make a right. So, moving forward, I'll try and ease down and cut out the name calling. I may still slip from time to time, but I'm just putting that out there. But what I wanted to talk to is that I get a lot of people that are still defending Donald Trump, despite some of my criticism. And I wanted to talk about both the current and the past presidency and analyze some of the contrast between the two. Primarily cover the bullet points, because there's a lot to cover and I don't want to keep this video that long. So, let's start with Joe Biden, who he is the president that I did vote for. But I do ask to reiterate from a previous video is that I'm not a big supporter of Joe Biden, believe it or not. I really am not. I do lean Democrat, but I lean more progressive. I'm registered as a Democrat, but I lean more progressive. So when it became the choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, I naturally chose Biden. But he wasn't the candidate that I wanted. He's the one that won the primaries. During the primary election, back in 2020, I voted for someone else who didn't make it. And to be fair, that's on the DNC, which I still think they made a mistake till this day, but what's done is done. So, instead of dwelling on the what could have been, let's focus on what we have. And my overall feeling on Biden has improved, considering where we are now. In the beginning, Joseph Biden did a lot of what I refer to as safe bets. You know, he was making some effort and some small changes here and there, which is fine, but the upside to a safe bet is the risk is minimal. So you stand a pretty good chance of succeeding. The downfall is because of the minimal risk, the reward too becomes minimal as well. So, you know, it's something, but it's very slow progress, and the primary reason I chose Biden was because I wasn't so much voting for the person, I was voting for change. We've had some changes, some for the better, but there's also a lot of problems, which I do get. The biggest complaints I hear about is the economy, the inflation, the gas prices. To be fair, I don't blame that on Biden any more than I blame COVID on Trump, which I'll get into in a moment. I want to focus on Biden for the most part. And after a while, he was running into some setbacks, and I even sent a message to him at the whitehouse.gov website. Whether I sissied out if he personally reads it, he doesn't have time. But, you know, I did get a response encouraging him to do certain things on the progressive level, like focusing on the minimum wage, that sort of thing. One thing I did like is he was able to improve international relationships to a point, unlike Donald Trump, that kind of created a little separation there, since he was also a man who warmed up to dictators, mainly Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un. I think when he put an end to the war in Afghan, I think that was a good thing. However, the way he initiated it was very poorly done. Now, I'm not a military strategist. I don't know anything about those things, so I'm not sure how to comment on. Because one person said is that given that situation, how long that war has been going on for, there would be no quick and easy solution. There would be no solution that would please everyone and that would run smoothly. It was bound to go bad no matter what. But I still think he could have done things a little bit better. I'm not exactly sure how, just my instinct feels that way. I realize the feeling is not justifiable without evidence, but, you know, most people seem to agree that he could have done better with that. I still credit him for doing it. Other presidents have talked about it, but never actually had the courage to actually make the move. So I do have to give some credit where credit's due. But then after a while, you know, his approval rating started to go down, and understandably so, with the market conditions and everything. One thing I did note is that when gas prices were going pretty high, yeah, they were quick to blame him for that. And even though, as I said, that's something beyond his control. How he could have dealt with it, or still deal with it now, I think he could do that a little better as well. When gas prices approved, the right-wing media was never quick to give him credit for that. Only when the prices were up, then it's all on him. And that became a campaign thing for people on the right that were running during the midterm elections. When he passed the infrastructure bill, that was a good thing. And when he attempted to cancel student debt, that was also a good thing. And when he did that, his numbers started to go up. And he started to take a more aggressive approach from what I saw, where he called out, you know, the whole MAGA group, you know, claiming to be opposed to that, how that is a threat to our democracy. But at the same time, highlighting that MAGA does not make up all Republicans. Now, naturally, people on the right, in full hypocritical fashion, you know, criticized them for those attacks, but, you know, they didn't say anything with all the vile things that Trump said. But when Joe says something like this, suddenly it's bad. No, it's not bad. You know, he called it like it is. That was the Joe Biden, as they sometimes refer to him with the silly name Dark Brandon, that I wanted to see from the get-go, which I didn't. Even Kamala Harris I've kind of lost faith on. I thought she was okay as a vice presidential choice. I was curious to see where that went. Obviously, it felt more like a political strategy, you know, a woman, an African-American woman, or, you know, a woman of color, I should say, because I forget what her other her ancestry comes from, but, you know, it was more of a political strategy. I'm not saying that I didn't think she was ideal, but seeing her now is, I don't really see that she's done anything bad. But when there were a lot of issues with him trying to pass certain bills, and when you had Democrats like Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin getting in the way, I don't feel he was putting an aggressive push towards it. I don't think the DNC was really being strong on that fashion. We've seen what the GOP does when certain members step out of line or don't get with their program. They put the screws on them, and, you know, they eventually dry them out or strip them of their power. I don't think maybe Biden should have gone to that extreme, but when it came to Sinema and Manchin, who were causing a lot of problems, I think he could have done things to put the screws on them and get them in line, and even found ways to compromise. Kamala Harris would sometimes make excuses, and when pressed, she would, you know, then you would see some of the pushback. Then you would see some of that aggressive side in her. But it was always more like just reciting campaign slogans. The words are fine, the intentions are fine, but the actions have to measure up too. Otherwise, you know, it's just a lot of empty rhetoric. The reason I think midterms we did a lot better than expected, because I'll admit I was concerned, I didn't think things were going to go so well, is because I think voters were more fed up with Trump. They were fed up with these other people running that were trying to be Trump wannabes, you know, just following everything he does from the step-by-step playbook, you know, criticizing Brandon, you know, voter fraud based on lies, all this other stuff, and but not really bringing any substance to the table. It may have worked back then for Trump when he ran against Hillary. It certainly didn't work now. And people didn't want more of that. Let's also keep in mind, Trump lost the popular vote twice. If he was to run in 2024, I think he would lose it a third time. So what I would encourage Brandon, in spite of how the remainder of the midterms go, because we know we won the Senate, we recently achieved a victory in Arizona, where, you know, Kari Lake, the Republican who was running for governor, lost to Katie Hobbs. But we still might lose the House. I'm not assuming we will, I'm not assuming we won't. I'm trying to be optimistic, but at the same time, I gotta be realistic too, and I'm not so sure, but let's wait and see. To say nothing about the governor race, which is going to the runoff in December between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. That in itself is a story, but I don't want to get off track. Since Biden has been showing more aggression lately, more of the Dark Brandon, I think we should see a lot more of that going into the next 2 years, because he's going to have to be really band together the DNC, really be a lot more aggressive to get things done. Otherwise, you know, assuming we lose the House, more than likely the GOP is going to block anything and everything he tries to do. And by 2024, assuming he does run, the GOP can just go on the, oh look, he accomplished nothing. The other thing was the infrastructure bill. I don't know if I mentioned that, but if I didn't, that was also a good achievement. He also expanded on the Affordable Care Act. So, you know, I think for the most part, there's been some change, but we still need more, a lot more, if we're really going to make an impact in 2024. Do I think Biden's going to run? That I'm not sure of. I'm on the fence. I mean, he could or he may not. I don't know if you want to weigh in on his age or anything like that, or just think there could be somebody better, which is also a valid excuse. I would understand that. As to who he runs again, that's more speculation. Will it be Trump or DeSantis? I don't know. You know, I'm more focused on the here and now. I'm still looking at the remainder of the midterms and what we do moving forward, because there's still a lot to be done. So, let's focus on Donald Trump, who obviously won the presidency in 2016. Here's something that you're not going to believe when I say this, at least not the MAGA crowd or Republicans, conservatives. I wanted Trump to succeed. I really did, but not for him. Not so he could inflate his ego and brag some more, because that's the way he was, you know. He's very arrogant, very egotistical. You know, that's not necessarily disqualifying for a president, but I wanted him to succeed for the sake of the people. I wanted him to push policies through that could benefit the American people. And that's where he primarily failed to do so. So, putting his character aside, like all the tweeting and some of the silly things, mostly Trump did a lot of talk, but very little action. And I think that kind of hinged on the fact that he wasn't a politician, that he never really had any understanding of what the job was. And you saw that ignorance on display in some of the interviews, like the AP interview, where he just realized he understands what NATO is and stuff like that. Or where when he was running, he didn't know what the nuclear triad was. Putting the qualifications aside, the other thing I don't think he truly understood, or he does and just doesn't care, is that words do matter. And we saw that on full display during the Charlottesville incident, where you had white supremacists marching against counter-protesters, and a person drove his car into a crowd and killed a woman, to which he had the infamous saying where you had very fine people on both sides. Some misconstrue that as not being racist, but there were hate groups that saw that, and they felt empowered because he never really called them out directly. Words matter. You know, he's told lies in the past about not knowing who David Duke is, which he knows exactly who David Duke is when he gave Trump his endorsement. You know, were there times he did call out white supremacy? Yes, he did, but it was always like the bare minimal. It was always like at the very end, you know. That's something you got to say with full conviction. Are you opposed to white supremacy? Yes, I am. Are you opposed to racists? Yes, I am. There shouldn't be any pause, any doubt, any, ambiguity. You should just be able to come out and say it. I am opposed to that. But he never did that because, that was part of his base. The other thing he did, which I thought was odd, was going on all these rallies after the campaign. Now, maybe people don't think that's a big deal. He's just trying to please his fans. It's more like he's going there to get his ego stroked. And in doing so, that shows you one thing. He's not there for the American people. He is there for himself. He tried to do the healthcare bill, and that's where he failed on. And he, or the GOP, I should say, could not come up with a healthcare policy that not only the party liked, they couldn't come up with one that the American people liked. It got shut down with the infamous line, "Nobody knew healthcare would be so complicated." We knew. Do you think the job was going to be easy? And, just other things in general. The way he handled, race relations, the way he, denied that Russia was interfering with the election. I mentioned that before, when he said that at a press conference with Vladimir Putin right there. He may have been physically taller than Vladimir Putin, but that day, Putin was towering over him, showing him to be the puppet that he really is. And, just some of the other scandals in between, trying to, extort favoritisms from Ukraine, to do spying on Joe Biden, a political opponent, And the real biggest failure was the whole pandemic thing. And by spreading a lot of misinformation and just doing all the wrong things, not encouraging masking and not encouraging vaccine. He eventually did get the vaccination, and he did do the warp speed towards the end of his presidency, which is good and duly noted, but it seemed like too little too late. Like, you just showed up late for the party and you didn't even bring a gift. Silly analogy, but you get the point. Prior to all that, he was telling people to, inject themselves with disinfectant, to, maybe put light in the system. Well, I don't know where he heard that nonsense from, but he's not a doctor. But instead of contradicting the doctors, instead of contradicting medical advice, instead of not ramping up testing because he didn't want to see the numbers go up because that would look bad for him. Again, it's about his image. Wrong. It's about saving American lives. And yes, I am saying he has blood on his hands. Okay? I don't think I'm overreacting that way. I think, you have a responsibility, which is something he said at a press conference. He said, I don't take responsibility for anything. He's also been on tape saying that in some of the Bob Woodward interviews. Wrong. You are the President of the United States. Everything falls on you. That's not to say you responsibly caused some of the issues. As I said, I don't blame the inflation or the gas prices on Joe Biden, but I think he could do a better job at dealing with it. Just like I don't blame COVID on Donald Trump. He didn't cause the pandemic, but how he dealt with it, the ineptitude and some of the incompetence, that's on him. Okay? When lives are lost because you're spreading misinformation or you're showing a lot of inaction, that is on you. Okay? You don't get to just take credit for the good things and just ignore the bad stuff. Everything falls on you. And as a general rule, if you're not prepared to accept that as a leader, you shouldn't even be in the White House. I'm not just referring to Trump, I'm just saying that across the board. So, and again, like I said, I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden. He wasn't the person that I wanted. But then I look at Donald Trump, and again, I'm not going to go in the name calling. He is a racist, and I'm highlighting the point that that's not name calling. If somebody is talking like a racist, acting like a racist, then you call it like it is. That's not name calling. That is calling a spade a spade. So you have this person here who is a complete narcissist. He lies pathologically a lot. What amazes me is not the lies. I mean, that's a given for any politician, but he just does it blatantly. And what's surprisingly, since he's been doing it for most of his life, he really is bad at it. You can really tell when he's not telling the truth, especially at his rallies when he has no filter and just speaks freely. So as I was saying, he's a pathological liar. He's committed a lot of hypocrisy, saying he was going to do certain things and didn't, where, you know, he attempted some policies and failed, and has shown time and time again between the rallies and some of his other actions that he's more in it for himself. It just begs the question, why should I support this guy? He is not doing anything for me. He's not doing anything for the American people, okay? And most importantly, his lack of qualifications. A former, you know, a current businessman who is also a TV personality. I never watched The Apprentice. I don't care for it, all right? I'm sure it's an interesting show. Some people like it, but the bottom line is, even to this day, he doesn't know anything about federal law. He doesn't know anything about the Constitution. And I don't think he really grasps the fact that he should know. That, you know, he should understand what the job entails. That it's not about him. That you are there to serve the American people. Not just the MAGA crowd, not just the red states, not just the state you live in, but all states across the United States. All right? And that applies to any and all presidents. So, when it came to make a choice, yeah, I chose Biden. I pretty much probably would have chose any Democrat except Biden. And the thing to keep in mind is, I have voted Republican in the past, okay? Because I try not to put party over country, but select the best person, you know, for the role or the title of Commander-in-Chief. Now, I realize friends of mine who disagree with me, who are still Trump supporters, or simply the fact that they support Trump because they absolutely hate Joe Biden. Here's my simple message. I can understand why you don't support Joe Biden. I can understand why you hate him. You know, does the inflation and some of the other issues concern me? Absolutely. But here's some other problems I've heard, that like there are open borders. No, that's not the case. I think Biden, on that note, could have done a better job at dealing with it. On Trump's side, his idea was putting children in cages. Now, if that doesn't concern you, it should, because that is just cruelty in one of the sickest forms. That's not the America I foresee, where you see children in cages and the likes of Mike Pence and Lindsey Graham, you know, two wealthy white people looking over with the American flag overhead thinking, yeah, that's perfectly fine. No, it's not fine. That is unacceptable. And again, that also is a reflection on Trump's racism. He could have stopped that with a simple phone call. He didn't. Biden, since then, just to write it down, you know, he tried to increase the minimum wage. You know, when there was a baby food shortage, he tried to remedy that. You know, that all the Republicans voted against. With the student loan forgiveness, even then the Republicans were also against that as well. And here's something else to note, is that student loan forgiveness, increasing the minimum wage, you know, Trump could have done that. He could have easily done that. The first 2 years, he had both control of the Senate and the House. Why didn't he? You know, yeah, he did try to post the health care, but that contained more things about tax cuts for the wealthy, and he did that at a later time. So that was one of his greatest achievements, tax cuts for the wealthy, which, talking to friends who were accountants, all pretty much said the same thing, that mostly negatively impacted the working class. If you're a millionaire or a billionaire, you did great. Well, that's fine, but Donald Trump, when he was president, isn't just there to cater to the rich. He's there to cater to the country, to America. As I was trying to say, friends of mine who watch this video will still disagree with me, or they'll pivot to Biden and say, you know, tobacco and the inflation and all the other things. And, you know, there are other problems too, which some of it you could say fall on Biden, some of it doesn't. But here's the one thing I do know, pertaining to Trump and his administration, which to me was primarily a failure, which any MAGA would disagree with. You know, if you're still watching the video, or even watch this video to begin with, I can't imagine why, but here's one point where there's no getting around. If Hillary Clinton won the election in 2016 and did every single solitary thing that Donald Trump did, all the way up until the end of her first term, and up to and especially including January 6th, where, you know, you had the failure of healthcare, where you had cuddling up to, you know, authoritarians and dictators, like the scandal with Stormy Daniels using campaign funds, violating the Emolument Clause, the nepotism, the cronyism, to say nothing about all the inappropriate tweets and behaviors at rallies. Technically, they would look at Hillary Clinton and think, oh yeah, that's okay because she did the same exact thing. No, they would be flat out against her, and so would I. In fact, if you take any name, you know, you remove Trump and you put, you know, Joe Biden, Obama, Clinton, Bill Clinton, I mean. You got everyone on the right, you know, the MAGA crowd or conservatives and Republicans in general, be flat out against all that, and rightfully so. So you can't look at the Trump administration on a whole and say, oh yeah, he was great. Some of them are saying that. Some of them see him as like the greatest president that ever was. It's not true. They see, you know, the insurrection as an act of patriotism. No, it was an act of domestic terrorism. And he's responsible for that, as well as the lives lost. Which that in itself is a whole different discussion because, you know, some friends commented on that as well, which I wanted to address. But, you know, I'm not opposed to Donald Trump as the person itself. I could care less about the wealthy man. You know, I never watched The Apprentice. I wasn't impressed with him, even years before when he wasn't in politics, you know. Yeah, he's wealthy, he did his things with his hotels, casinos, whatever. But he was dishonorable back then, and he's still dishonorable to this day. And it's playing out even more in this fascist-like state. I'm going to stress this, I am not calling it fascism. In a previous video, I asked the question, if not fascism, if not extremism, what would you call it? Where you have this cult-like personality, which is constantly spreading lies, which is sending a message that it's okay to hate, which is saying things that encourage and, you know, lead to violence. That's not a person I'm going to support. And if it was anyone else besides Donald Trump, you know, even a Democrat, if a Democrat was behaving in such a way, I would be opposed to that person too. Because those persons are not for the American people. Donald Trump has and always will be for himself. And people are rejecting it. And the proof is in the midterms. I know what's going to happen in 2024, but if he does run, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to vote against him. Because it's the right thing to do. Okay? I may not be all on board with Biden, but I'll take a Biden over a Trump any day. Because truth be told, this question was posed by Ted Cruz himself. Are we better off now than we were 2 years ago? And the answer simply is yes. And if you didn't get that from everything that I outlined, then it just tells me one thing. You're of the mindset, I'm going to support Donald Trump no matter what. And that is your right to choose. I don't agree with it, but I at least have to respect it, whether it's, you know, a personal friend or acquaintance or a total stranger. I don't agree with the support to Trump that he still gets. But on the flip side, his MAGA base is dwindling. Statistically, it's only about 30 to 40%, you know, the MAGA base. Still a lot of people, but it's not as much as 60 to 70% of Republicans who don't want to be on board with Trump. And say nothing about the Democratic voters and the young voters. So, anyway, hope you understand. Thank you for watching.